Hi everyone, Janelle here. I'm a functional nutritionist and doctor of natural medicine. This is my podcast where we talk about midlife wellness in the mountains.
My wonderful and brilliant friend Camilla Beevor joined me today to discuss how the foods we eat impact our mood. Camilla has a master's degree in nutrition and is board certified in integrative and functional nutrition. We discuss how food impacts our mood, what foods are associated with poor mood, and what foods to focus on to improve mood. We also talk, of course, about how this becomes more important at midlife as our mood is impacted by fluctuating hormones like estradiol and progesterone.
Welcome, Camilla. I am super happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
So, I think we've been talking about doing this since we did our pre dawn run to the escarpment at Palisades for the Western States race. So, I'm happy we're finally making this happen. And I do love how you think into things methodically and truly functionally. And this topic is so important for everybody and really also for midlife women as we journey through the process of perimenopause to menopause. So, first off, eating for mood to improve your mood is like your number one jam. So, can you start by telling us why you're so passionate about this topic?
Yes. So I've been thinking about this. I think it all started because I grew up with a sister who was very reactive to what she ate. And my mother was ahead of her time and linked it to food early. And fast forward 40 years or 30 something years, and I have a child who is very reactive to what he eats to the point where it has, I believe, if he wasn't living in our family, he could well be on medication to control outbursts. But what we've needed to do is control his diet. So that's where it started. I then have seen a lot of clients who struggle with, well, clearly in midlife with anxiety. That's a big one in today's world. Um, but struggle with, I guess, a, a cycle, a cyclical reaction to their environment, which they can't explain. It's like I wake up on a Wednesday morning, I always have a headache, or at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I always feel irritated, and it's more than just hangry. And I think that the nutrition voice of food and mood is very quiet still. There's so much in the nutrition world, and I think the impact of food on our brain is still pretty quiet. I believe deep down that no one wants to feel irritated, no one wants to feel anxious, no one wants to be in a bad mood, whether you're 4 or whether you're 40. And I think we have a lot more power to control that with our environment, our dietary environment, as one piece of it, than we think we do. We live in a culture which gives us a lot of medication when you don't feel right. And I think that I've seen firsthand many times that actually, if we understand a little bit more of the why, you can avoid the medication and you can be your own doctor.
Oh, I love that last line. Yeah, if you understand the why, that's definitely a passion of thinking functionally. So I love that. And we're going to get into that. But I just wanted to touch first on what you said. I think when you feel things at home, like when you have direct experience with your family and with your sister and your mom being on top of things and then your son, I just think that is such a big motivator. And so I love that you started out with that motivation in your practice and then you've seen it clinically so many times, but I think that's true for a lot of people. They see things in their family, but maybe they don't know what to do or what's going on. So that's why we're here. So I love that that was kind of like your primary motivator. Before we jump into things, can you just clarify what does mood encompass? Like what are we talking about? Like what different symptoms are attributed to like mood?
Okay, great question. I would say in my realm, mood encompasses anxiety, irritability, like that calm, sweet happiness that we all aspire to feel, um, anger, irrational responses to things. So being triggered, being really close to your trigger zone too much of the time, that is what I believe is part of mood. So something that I think, particularly in children, we often label them as a characteristic. You're like, oh, he's just really moody, or
Mm,
he's having tough teenage years. I actually generally don't think it is a characteristic of that person. I think it's an attribute of their environment and how they're interacting with their environment. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes. Um, so does that answer your question? So that it's anger, irritability, anxiety, um, happiness, and calm, but
mhm,
also like being close to a trigger point all the time.
mhm.
Is
Yeah,
it
thanks for clarifying. So, okay, we're gonna kinda get into it right away. So
okay?
let's go there. Let's just talk about how a few different ways. Okay, we obviously can't go into all the ways, right? A few different ways that food can impact our mood. Like, what's the mechanism? Just, not super
Okay.
scientifically, but just so kind of people understand, what are a few of the different mechanisms?
So I would say, okay, so the top two I would say are inflammation and then neurotransmitter production.
Mm,
So they're kind of two different angles of how food can impact. So with regards to inflammation, I feel I have seen clinically, there's research to support this, that if you are inflamed in your body systemically, your brain is inflamed. And when your brain is inflamed, you can experience mood dysregulation. So if you are reacting to foods that you're eating and your response is inflammatory, and that can be caused by many different, you know, reasons, you are likely to be closer to your trigger point because brain's inflammation, which can also be caused by dehydration. Just going to put that out there.
mm, mhm.
So
Sometimes it's
that
simple.
also, yeah, nice and simple. That can also mean that you are experiencing mood swings, even as simple as dehydration. It can be caused by hormonal flux, which we see in midlife, of course.
Mhm.
That can cause inflammation, like the estrogen swinging around as it does, can
As it
cause,
does.
as it does, can mean that we're more prone to inflammation, and that inflammatory status in our brain can have an impact on our mood. Something which is almost easier to get our heads around, I think, though, is that we produce the majority of our neurotransmitters in our gut. And so our gut bacteria are responsible for producing the metabolites, which then go on and produce the neurotransmitters. If those gut bacteria are in an unhealthy balance, dysbiotic, however you want to say that, in our microbiome, so that inner garden has been fed too much sugar and not enough fiber, for instance, your pathogenic bacteria are going to take over the real estate, which really is there for your commensal, your good bacteria. And the metabolites needed to build those neurotransmitters might not be there. And I see that a lot as we age more because our microbiome is less resilient as we age. And there's been I mean, I don't know if any of the listeners will probably know this, but there's been a sort of mushrooming in the nutritional world of psychobiotics.
Mm.
So the marketing of probiotics for mood. And that's exactly what that's dealing with. It's trying to promote the strains which have been linked in the research to creating the neurotransmitters, the favorable neurotransmitters that we want.
Yeah, and so just to clarify that, so the friendly bacteria eat the food we eat, the fiber, and then they produce those psychobiotics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is so cool. But you also spoke into, okay, the two things that I heard you say were inflammation
Yeah.
and neurotransmitters. And, to sum it up, food impacts directly inflammation and our neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
So that's big. I mean, there's so many other things we could jump into in regards to that. Like, I mean, even like blood sugar, right?
Yes.
Dysregulated
Yes.
blood sugar.
Yes. I mean, I would go so far as to say that if you're taking care of your microbiome, you are likely taking care of your blood sugar more effectively than not. That's how
Mm,
I like to see it. Because if
mm.
you're eating the whole foods, the good fibers, well, all fiber is good fiber, but fiber, the rainbow of fruits and vegetables, aside from maybe protein, I'm not maybe up to speed on whether protein actually positively or negatively impacts your microbiome, but you're probably eating a whole foods diet, and that in turn is going to help blood sugar. But yes, and the issue in developed countries in today's world is that we eat too much sugar because it is in everything. Like, I have 4 children. I'm a big proponent of sweet treats and enjoying your food and having fun with food. But the issue is that it's like a slow drip in everything from bread to pasta sauce to and that will throw off our microbiome, and with it's such a heavy hit that you really have to work hard to make sure that you're incorporating all the nutrients of a whole foods diet in order to support the friendly bacteria to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And what I heard you say was so interesting, Camilla, because I actually haven't ever thought of it this way. So what you said was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you said when you eat to support your microbiome, you are going to be eating to support blood sugar. And that's so true, but the opposite is not true.
Right.
Some people, if they're eating just for blood sugar, like, maybe a not great version of keto or something, that has no fiber, then you're not supporting your microbiome. So I love that flip side of it. That's true. If you're eating to support your microbiome, it's likely your blood sugar is going to be pretty regulated.
I
So,
mean, I think so. As a
yeah.
high level kind of rule of
Yeah.
thumb.
Yeah, we were just, like, thinking through that, though, that makes sense, I really like that, because it's all those colorful fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds that are so good for our microbiome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's honestly kind of true for, like, all of health, really. I was just thinking, like, if we eat for
Yeah.
our microbiome, we're sort of addressing everything. But, that's gonna be another talk I'm gonna give in a couple weeks. So, we'll leave it at that. But, yeah, so you spoke into, blood sugar and inflammation and neurotransmitters, and do you wanna talk about before we move on, do you wanna talk about the gut-brain axis and the gut-brain relationship?
Yeah. I'll just do a high level. I mean, I think probably most of your listeners know that there is a gut brain connection, and that we now generally call our gut our second brain. They are connected by the vagus nerve. And well, there's 2 parts to this. One is, I think it is really important and kind of cool to know that 80 to 90% of the communication is going from the gut to the brain, which I just think is very opposing to what we all as humans believe. We think our brain controls everything. And in this case, clearly it doesn't. Or there's more information coming upstream. But I think the other piece to note is that if your gut is unhealthy, and if you have a leaky gut, as we call it in the industry, or you're in a situation where you are reacting digestively to a whole host of foods, it is very likely that you have quote unquote leaky brain, and that is causing, back to the inflammation piece, that is causing inflammation in your brain. So it's not. I find a lot of my clients, if they're not having GI symptoms, they don't believe that their mental symptoms are being caused by food. And if they're not having mental symptoms, they can't understand that their GI symptoms could be impacting their mood. But they're very, very interrelated. And oftentimes, I'll start with someone who is having GI symptoms, and we'll do an elimination diet and take out some foods. And one of the first things I'll say is, like, I feel amazing. I feel so clear headed. I'm sleeping better. I feel happier. I'm not fighting myself. I have less noise in my brain. I just feel more focused, like a whole host of things. So that's even just sort of anecdotal testament to how closely they're connected, even if you don't think that in your body they're impacting.
Right. Yeah, getting that clinical evidence is really fun when people just feel better when they change their food. I love that. Yeah, I really do think it's amazing, and it really is a mind shift that so much communication goes from our gut to our brain instead of the reverse that we were taught for so long. So that's really cool. Okay, so thank you. Those are some really great ways that food or how food can impact our mood. Do you want to chat quick about why this becomes a little bit more important in midlife?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and you're the midlife expert, so correct me if I say anything that you think is wrong. But I feel, and what I see in my practice, is that we are just heightened at midlife. There is so much flux in our hormones. Our estrogen is doing that whole crazy thing. We're at a more inflamed state. Our cortisol is also heightened. And as a consequence, any little shift that we make in our diet that doesn't support us is magnified at midlife. We're more sensitive to caffeine, we're more sensitive to sugar, we're more sensitive to alcohol. Our liver is, overworked basically and under supported at midlife, generally speaking. And as a consequence, our metabolism of foods which or chemicals on those foods or in those foods which we might not metabolize brilliantly at the age of 17 is suddenly exacerbated in its negative, result. Um, so that's what I see. I think that, the insomnia, the brain fog, which people talk about, the hormonal disruption that's happening. I mean, I'm making it sound bad. I don't mean that it is bad. It's just transition would be a better word. The
Yeah.
hormonal transition, not disruption, um, just sensitizes us to everything else in our environment that might not be supportive. So it's a time to lean into that and really enjoy trying to figure out what is supportive and what maybe was a trigger in your 20s and 30s, but you didn't notice it or didn't need to notice it, and now suddenly is. Our blood sugar levels, I mean, that's a huge piece, right? They're so much more easily dysregulated in our midlife transition. And I believe that that has a really big impact on well, sleep, which then has a big impact on mood, but also directly to mood. The swings that some of us can experience, our blood sugar swings, um, impacts our feelings of anxiety and excitement and stress, and our adrenals are fatigued, our cortisol levels are high, our magnesium levels are low. Like, there's so many pieces to it
Yeah.
where foods can come in and be supportive, or they can just be triggers.
I think you phrased that all so beautifully, Camilla. I think that was really well said. Like, there's so much changing, and we're just more vulnerable to feeling it during that time. And if we don't make changes, we are just going to feel a lot more wobbly in all the ways. So I think you really just touched on so many great points there. And I think the cool thing is that it's like with those hormone changes, our body is asking us to come into better alignment with what's healthy for us. So it's like we could endure more crap, and now we're just becoming to more sensitive to what's actually really healthy for us in the long run even. So I beautiful answer. I love that. Okay, so let's just go there, Camilla. What are some of the I mean, everyone is unique. Like, that is a fundamental principle of functional practicing functionally, right? So we know everyone is unique, everyone has their unique reactions to food. But what are some common foods that you see that can really cause dysregulated mood?
So sugar is a really big one, right? Especially
And that's
sugar.
pretty universal.
Yeah, pretty common. So sugar on an empty stomach is a big one. When you're hungry or you're starving, you haven't eaten, and then you just eat sugar. Kid, adult, midlife woman, grandparent, whatever it is. There's very common subset of characteristics or behaviors which happen afterwards, which, as you know, is like the high, and they're like, oh, this is awesome, like I feel great, I've got this energy, and then the crash. And that crash, um in some, I keep going back to children because they're so unfiltered that it's easy to see they're not trying to override what they're feeling, they just are acting in the way that they're feeling. But a child crashes and has a tantrum and lies on the floor and is irrational and, painful to watch, whereas an adult gets moody. They feel like, especially if they're in an environment where they can't actually go and try and get outside or, exercise or do something to try and move their metabolism of that sugar through. They are stuck in an office and they're moody. They're having a sugar crash. And that I see a lot. And a lot of people, they'll have like a Coca-Cola or a cup of coffee at 4 in the afternoon, with cream and two sugars. And then they crash an hour or 90 minutes later. And they're like, I don't know, by the time I get home, I'm so furious. I'm like, yeah, because your sugar has just crashed.
And let's just be a little, I mean, controversial is not the right word, but like, what are you, I mean, even when you say sugar, like I see,
Yeah.
people are like, oh no, I don't eat sugar. And then we get into it and they're like, oh, well, I stopped and had a green juice or I had an herba mate can or, so like, can you go into that a little bit more too? Like by sugar,
Yeah.
you don't mean like, okay, you're necessarily having a cookie from the bakery even. Like,
It's really anything which is not combined with fat, fiber, or protein, in my opinion. And that is a lot of foods. So as you say, so the green juice, if you were going to eat those green vegetables or fruits, that would be fine. That you wouldn't see the same spike and drop in your sugar levels. Um, the coffee with sugar, the Coca-Cola, but even if you're having, help me, yeah, the matcha, anything from Starbucks,
me,
basically.
like, of those canned drinks, so
Yeah,
many of them, the
yeah,
kombuchas,
yeah.
some of them
Oh,
are loaded with sugar, right?
huge.
Even, like, some of the health food bars,
Yeah, absolutely.
loaded with sugar and no fiber, really.
And often, like the gluten-free stuff, I'm afraid, having just said that so many people react to gluten, but the gluten-free stuff is worse in many ways from a sugar perspective than the whole grain gluten equivalent. So there are so many falses may be wrong, but misleading health claims on processed foods at the moment, that a lot of them cause blood sugar spikes if you're not eating them with some fiber or some fat or
I
some
think that's
protein.
such a great simple framework for people to understand that if they're not eating something with fiber, fat, or protein, it's likely gonna be received as sugar in their body, because the women in my metabolism group, everyone is always shocked, gluten-free pasta, potato chips, corn nuts, like foods that are salty that we take as sugar because they do not have any fiber, fat, and protein. So
Yeah.
I just think that clarification is really important for people when we talk about our reactions to sugar. Um, but that's obviously a massive one. So any other ones you want to mention before we talk into the good foods?
Yeah, I was just gonna say the high heat seed oils. So they are they are actually there's another one as well I wanted to touch on. But seed oils, which are included in processed foods, have usually been heated to a very high degree, and they cause inflammation pretty ubiquitously in our bodies. And so they can cause mood dysregulation, just because if you that gut brain barrier, and it can cause inflammation in the brain. I think in combination with that, because they're so closely, well, because they're contained in processed foods, the processing of the foods has often stripped many of the really important nutrients from the original whole foods, including B vitamins and magnesium and zinc. And all those nutrients are really important for back to the neurotransmitter production. So when you're eating processed foods, you're not only eating, high heat seed oils, which is inflammatory directly, but you're also not eating a ton of the nutrients which are really important to making the neurotransmitters in your gut. So it's kind of a double edged. You might not have a reaction from the second part of that immediately, but over time, that nutrient deficiency builds up and your neurotransmitter production decreases. And then that has mood implications.
Yeah, that's such a big point, especially because that was neurotransmitters is one of your big points at the beginning that can in fact impact mood. And then I'll just have to add, those processed foods and the seed oils are both super damaging for mitochondria, and they lack the food for making energy. All those nutrients that we need to make energy beyond sugar or fat. Um,
Yeah.
so so then obviously we're going to, not feel great mood wise if we are not producing enough energy. So many reasons for seed oils and processed foods. I love that you've mentioned these three so far. Any other ones before we go on?
Um, I don't think any, I mean, I think the standard American diet does a pretty good job of depleting most of what we need to feel good. With regards, whether it's with regards to energy, whether it's with regards to sleeping well, whether it's, there's a whole host of things. Um, so just trying to like steer towards whole foods and trying to steer towards the Mediterranean diet will mean that you're doing a lot more than just emitting the high heat seed oils or the sugar. You're actually including a whole host of nutrients, which is so important, as you say, to the mitochondria, to energy. I mean, that was another piece that I haven't really spoken to, but someone that's feeling constantly fatigued is not in a good mood, generally speaking. So, from a depression standpoint or an anxiety standpoint, or just being down, just feeling down. So, trying to feed back to the microbiome, trying to feed our microbiome as many different colors and foods, and we'll get to that in a minute, as possible, and keep that strong, has so many downstream effects on brain health.
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, that's a perfect segue. So I would love to talk about foods that people can focus on because one of the things I want to do in this podcast is give people, super tangible tools to help them feel better. So again, we've kind of established in midlife we're super wobbly, hormones are changing, anxiety is a bigger problem, sleep issues are a bigger problem. So many mood things become an issue for people that may not have had it in the past. So let's give people some foods to focus on that can really help. You just mentioned anything we can feed our microbiome, focusing on whole foods. So specifically, like what are a few foods that generally speaking can really help support mood?
So I love the omega 3s. That's a big one. They're anti inflammatory and they're an amazing brain food. The one thing that one of the top scholars, researchers in this area, Dr. Uma Nadu, if anyone's interested, she's written two amazing books on using food to support your brain and mood. And she goes all into ADHD and schizophrenia and the whole thing. But she talks about how a walnut looks like our brain and how walnuts are one of the most important and brilliant brain foods. So I love walnuts. I mean, all fatty fish, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, sardines, herrings, walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, which also help with hormonal balance. Those are like a real push of mine, especially to women in midlife, just because they have that anti inflammatory effect. Um, and
Camilla,
then,
do you recommend people supplement with omega 3s if they're not eating those foods every day?
yeah, good
Sorry.
point. Yeah, no, good point.
Do you? I don't know.
Yes, I do. I do. I specifically, unless you have a fish intolerance, I like the fish oils. I like some omegas. I'm very fussy about which ones you get. Shout out to Nordic Naturals or some of those very high-end brands which have third-party purity testing. So just check on that if you're going to supplement, because you do not want to be taking like little bombs of heavy metals. If you can't tolerate fish, the algae option is a great one too. But yeah, I do recommend we supplement unless you're eating. I mean, the guidelines are 4 servings a week, which I still think at midlife is low. So I would say unless you're eating a good serving of omegas every day, you should probably supplement, or you could benefit from supplementing. It would be worth a try.
Nice. Okay, great. That was good clarity. Okay, so omega 3 is really important one for mood and brain health. What else?
Fiber. So
Okay.
that's from the microbiome, but it also supports detox. So, especially at midlife, when we're trying to keep our hormones as regulated as possible, it's really important to have at least one, if not two, bowel movements a day. I hope this isn't going too too low
Oh
level.
no, we talk poop here. No, this is good. It's good. The
Um,
basics are important.
Yeah, like you don't generally have a happy, constipated midlife woman. I mean, you're not feeling good about yourself. You're not feeling happy. It has a massive impact on your brain when you're holding all that waste in your colon. So I recommend fiber from the microbiome standpoint. So we're talking like leafy greens, nuts, seeds, fruit, like whole vegetables. Think Mediterranean diet if you possibly, and as many different ones as possible. That's really important. So the rainbows, the rainbow of colors if possible, so that you can capture as many nutrients as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's great you said that because I do find that even people that I work with a lot who are doing a lot right, really healthy, moving their body, most of us can still improve diversity of fiber, colors and diversity. Like that is definitely something we get in our rut. We get the same broccoli every night, we get the same salad every night, peppers, but like it's fun to change things up and, maybe partake in like a CSA or
Yeah.
something that helps you pick things that you wouldn't normally pick or herbs, like that's such a fun way to add diversity. Sprinkle
And
seeds
even
on
grains,
everything. Hmm.
even sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but even grains, like I feel like they have a bad rap at the moment because we're also kind of shying away from carbs, which I'm not against, but I think pick your carbs. But rice, take rice, brown rice, black rice, wild rice, red rice. There's a ton of different healthy rice options, but we all get stuck, me included, in the one that we
Yeah.
just can constantly buy. So even, buckwheat and millet and amaranth, like just keep it the variety high, because it's going to support a much more diverse microbiome, which in turn is going to really benefit how you feel.
Yeah, that is awesome. So tangible. Okay, so omega-3s, fiber, anything else you want to mention for
Well,
brain health?
I feel like I should mention protein just for blood sugar stabilization. When our blood sugar is unstable, that is a fast highway to an unstable mood. So I do think including enough protein, especially at midlife when we've been shown to need more and be able to do less with our dietary protein intake, that's just worth a shout out. Lean, like fish, if you can do it with some good oily fish, and you're getting two bangs for your buck. But otherwise, good sources of lean protein or well farmed red meat or tofu, beans, pulses. A lot of that, the vegetable sources of proteins have good fiber as well. So again, you're getting two for one.
Yeah, it's amazing how many women in midlife say they feel so much better adding more protein.
Yeah.
Helps build that muscle, yeah, regulate blood sugar, that was a really good one. Yeah, those are really, really great tangible places for people to tap in and start making, some improvements. So, before we finish, which we are about out of time, why do you think it's confusing for people? Like, why do you think more people don't understand how much food impacts their mood?
That's a really good question. I think it's because it is so personal that there is no headline that applies to everyone. I think I really invite people to just pay attention. It doesn't take long. Like, keep a food mood journal for a week, not even 3 days if you need to. Um, look at your patterns of your food. It really is a very personal reaction, um, which I think just speaks to how we are all different. But that N of one situation means that, a practitioner can give out standard advice, but you're really your own doctor in this realm. Um, and I think that's why it's confusing, because we're bombarded by so much information. And I think it's just important to know that there is a link, and that it's not difficult to be the detective. And you really can feel so much better if you find out that there are any foods that are triggers for you or your family.
I think that's a great message and it's really empowering. So everyone can do that. Everyone can track. And I think just getting really curious about what's true for you and just owning that is super empowering and helpful. So that was great. Any final thoughts before we go? You've shared so much, Camilla, so many helpful things. Anything you want to say before we part ways?
There's one thing that I forgot, and that is the importance of magnesium, especially in midlife, which comes from nuts and seeds and pulses. And funny enough, dark chocolate is a popular one for magnesium. But I think because of our hormone imbalance and our higher cortisol levels, we tend to use up the magnesium at a faster rate than we did when we were younger. Um, I'm pretty certain, but correct me if I'm wrong, that the studies are showing that our foods have lower levels of magnesium because our soils are depleted or more depleted than they have been. Um, so I think America has something like 75% of the population is insufficient, not deficient, but insufficient in magnesium. So I feel like it's that mineral I really love to tout, especially with sleep issues and all that our swirling hormones can produce at midlife. So paying attention to that, asking a practitioner about whether it might be worth taking a supplement. It's a mineral of mine which I love. It's very calming, and I feel like it has direct impacts on mood as well.
Yeah, I find that too. Anxiety really responds well to magnesium.
Um,
Okay, you have shared so much. Thank you so much, Camilla. If people want to find you, where can they find you?
www.camillabeavernutrition.com.
Great. I will link that in the show notes. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your wisdom. I am super grateful.
Thanks, Janelle.
Thanks. Bye bye.
That's it for this week. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a comment and a review as that helps it reach more people. You can find me and the courses I teach, the Midlife Hormone Club and the Energy Club, online at Mountain Rebalance. I help midlife women understand their body and age better. If that sounds like you, please join my newsletter. And if there's a topic you'd like me to cover here or an expert you want me to have on, let me know. In the meantime, keep playing, and here's to aging our best.